So the other day, I was watching a video on the Philidor defense by international master Yevhenii, and we came to this position on screen right now, and he said something interesting.
It gives him this additional opportunity of playing d5, but I'm basically never afraid of d5. I can even answer with bishop b7, and then in the end of the day, this e4 pawn would be hanging.
Now, something didn't quite sit right with me about this analysis. I thought that at the end, black's position would be rather shaky, and black would probably end up losing some material along the way. So I booted up the engine, but the results were rather shocking. This position is bad for black. It is like plus 1.5 depending on what engine you use, but the continuation is rather absurd. In this position, there's a sequence of 13 forcing moves, at the end of which black will be losing. Can you outsmart an IM? Can you see 13 moves into the future? Go ahead and pause this video and try to make sense of this position, and then we'll dive right into it. So this is the position that we saw in the game, and what he calculated was d5, bishop b7, d takes c6, bishop takes c6, and he saw that at the end the e4 pawn was hanging because of this double attack, and it's only defended once. So white here is going to play the move bishop takes b5, and as black you basically have to take this. If you take the e4 pawn now with the knight, well then obviously just this, right? But if you take the e4 pawn with the bishop, things get a little bit more interesting. Knight takes bishop, knight takes, bishop takes knight, check, queen takes, and then queen d5 forks your knight and your rook. And here, if you were thinking, well, I'm instead going to take with the king, because now, after queen d5, my queen defends my rook, so this isn't really a fork. However, if you save your knight with, like, knight f6, there's this move. Knight takes e5 check, because this pawn is pinned, and this is just a terrible position for black to be in. You're probably getting checkmated soon. Losing your knight to the fork is actually the better move. So this means that back here, after bishop takes b5, you can't take this e4 pawn right away with either your knight or your bishop. You have to take this bishop. So bishop takes, knight takes, of course, and then you take the e4 pawn finally with your knight. And here, white has the idea of knight takes d6 check, supported by the queen. However, your knight is currently blocking that. This is already a pretty dangerous looking position for black, because you don't want one of your defenders usually being a piece that's in your opponent's territory, because they can quite easily kick it out. However, white has a very good move in this position, which is queen d5, and this actually forks the knight and the rook. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I can see why the knight, but the rook's defended by the queen, right? No, it isn't, because let's say knight f6 defending this knight, queen takes rook, queen takes, and then knight c7 check, and you lose your queen back. After white takes the queen, you're just going to recapture the knight, and you are down a rook for a knight, which is not ideal. And by the way, white also has the idea of knight c7 check immediately, distracting the queen so that they can take the rook with check. However, very luckily, black can escape the fork with this counterattacking move, rook b8, which counterattacks a knight. If queen takes knight, then rook takes knight, and it's a trade, and black's happy. However, white has this counterattacking move, bishop a7, threatening the exchange, and remember, your knight is also still hanging. And black can escape this predicament with the counterattacking move, knight e to f6, attacking the queen. Knight d to f6 is the second best move. However, after this, you allow queen c6 check, queen blocks, takes, and you lose your exchange in the end. As you might remember, this knight was doing a very important duty on e4. It was guarding this pawn, so white can now take this pawn, check, bishop takes, queen takes, and white is now up a pawn. However, that's not the end of the story, because black has this incredible move, rook b7, winning this b2 pawn. Now, you might be thinking, well, can't black just take this b2 pawn immediately? And the answer is actually no, because white has this move, long castles with tempo on your rook, and after you move the rook somewhere or another, white is going to play rook h to e1, and this pressure along these two ranks is just insane. Black is not going to survive this position. This position is +3. What rook b7 does is it forces white to block the e-file with bishop e3. And that's of course because e3 is the only safe square for the bishop. If you go here, this falls to knight e4 fork. So after rook b7, white has to play bishop e3, rook takes b2, white has the move knight takes e5. Now, of course, you can't capture this. Queen takes forks your king and your rook, so you can't play this. Now, at this point, there are many variations. Probably the simplest one is rook d1, queen c7, trying to trade off the queens, knight takes, queen takes here, rook takes, knight takes, castles. And you might be thinking, in this position, wait, black can go rook to a2, getting behind this pawn, is going to take it, and then is going to promote their own passed pawn. Black should be winning here. Well, if you do that, white is going to execute their threat of rook f to d1, which obviously doubles up on this knight over here. You can't go back and defend it with this rook, obviously, either way. And if you move this knight, rook d8 check, king up, and then you lose this rook. So in this position, black has to move the knight somewhere. Let's say knight f6. Afterwards, white is going to play rook a6, win this pawn, and is just in a totally winning endgame. So let's go through these moves again, because this is a completely forcing line. d5, bishop b7, takes, bishop takes b5, bishop takes b5 is forced, knight takes the e4, defending this pawn, queen d5 fork, rook b8 counterattack, bishop a7 counterattack, knight e to f6 counterattack, knight takes check, bishop takes, queen takes, rook b7, important Zwischenzug, bishop e3, rook takes b2, knight takes e5, rook takes c2, rook d1, queen c7, takes, castles, and white is winning. This is move 22. And the starting position where bishop b7 would have been played is move 9. So no, this idea of bishop b7 capturing with the bishop does not work because of this 13 move long forced sequence where you end up in a losing endgame. Meaning back here, if d5 is played, you have to just take this, which also means back here, a5 is kind of a mistake, and instead you should just go bishop b7 and avoid this entirely. And obviously no shade to this guy. I mean, he is an IM, and I'm just a lowly 1700 chess.com peasant. And the only reason that I saw all this is because I was reviewing this game with an engine. I had a lot of fun reviewing this. It's not every day where you can find a 13 move long forced sequence in a middle game, especially one that looks like this. I think it'll be disrespectful if I try to pronounce this. Yevhenii Yevlisiev. Yevlisiev. Yevhenii Yevlisiev. Yevhenii Yelisiev.